Hi guys, welcome back, and this time around I'm bringing you the Hidizs MK12 Turris. This is Hidizs' latest IEM, a flagship single DD, and its call to fame is the fact that Hidizs have used a diaphragm material which is 91% pure magnesium alloy, coupled to the fact that it's a 12mm driver, which is unusual in the sense that usually we are talking about 10mm drivers or smaller for single DD. So having a larger single DD is not something which is common, and also they have used a magnetic system with a very high flux density, approximately 1.5 Teslas, which is again an indicator that the driver used is of a very high quality, very high caliber driver, and with that high caliber, if properly tuned, obviously you will get a high quality sound, and that's the whole idea here from Hidizs with the Turris. The Turris joins, and let me just take you quickly through the box. The usual box from Hidizs for the products, very let's say understated, nothing flashy. It shows the IEM, which has got kind of this I would say Klingon vibe. In the back, some specifications worth mentioning is the fact that it's a 32 ohm impedance driver and that it's got a 111 dB sensitivity according to them. I would say that the sensitivity is not perhaps as high as they indicate, but that's just me. Maybe it does have, but I didn't find it to be a loud driver, let's put it that way, or a loud IEM. Inside, we have the usual accessories package. One of the things that I was somewhat disappointed, especially because we're talking about a flagship IEM, is the fact that they've included this case, which, I mean, if we're talking about an IEM that costs $20 or $30, that's fine. But the MK12 Turris has a suggested sales price of $199, so obviously it enters the realm of, let's say, the mid-priced single DD drivers. Although you can now get it, you can now secure it before the Kickstarter initiates. You can now secure it for a price which will end up being about $109. And if the $199, in my opinion, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, I think is an adequate price for overall the performance that the MK12 offers. Obviously, the $109 price will definitely be a very good price, because we are talking about the lower end of high quality single DD drivers usually being priced at that value, and you are getting, let's say, a mid-tier IEM for that price. Anyway, the case, like I said, I wish it had been a little bit nicer, but that's fine. It does have a nice selection of tips. I tried not only the stock tips, but I also tried some velvet from XINHS. I also tried some KBE 07s. I tried some Clarion tips as well. I tried a wide variety of tips, and I have to say that the XINHS velvet, and the stock tips here in the balanced format were the tips that I actually ended up preferring, and the ones that I ended up ultimately using. The wideboard tip that they have is actually not a bad tip. It's actually quite good. I found only that it was a little bit too soft on the outside, and compared with the BGVP whiteboard, which I also tried, although they had a very similar sound, the fact that this outer part of the tip was very soft and the IEM is relatively heavy, it kind of broke seal with relative ease, and that was a little bit irritating to say the least. But other than that, I mean, the tips, like I said, actually worked very well. There was some differences between them, but nothing too, let's say, significant. I would say that the wideboard tips, be it the stock ones or the BGVP, were able to do away with a little bit of a let's say, a trough that exists there in the frequency response. But afterwards, when I show you the graphs, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, tips are fine. The case, like I said, I would have liked a nicer case. In terms of the cable, although the cable, it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't really, tangle or anything of the sort. But I would have liked the cable at least with exchangeable terminations, and a little bit thicker gauge would have been nice. But again, I'm not gonna nitpick. That's just a little minor detail. Okay, the IEM themselves, they actually scream premium. They've got a nice weight to that. They've got an unusual shape, but that doesn't in any way mean that they will fit you in a bad way or not be ergonomic. I found it's precisely the opposite. I found that they actually fit very nicely, at least in my ears. They fit quite nicely, and that's it. They were not fatiguing, nothing. Like I said, they really have a very premium look to them. The other interesting or bonus thing that the Turris also brings is the interchangeable nozzles. You have the gold ones, which are on there. You have then these silver ones, and you have these red ones. And again, they also change slightly the frequency response, more noticeably with the red ones than necessarily with the silver ones, but definitely no more noticeable with the red ones. Each one of the tips then having or terminations, if you want to call them, having a specific little, let's say, sound profile. That's basically it in terms of the hardware. So a solidly built IEM, a very high quality driver inside, an interesting tuning. I'm jumping ahead, but an interesting tuning. The only thing that kind of lets down the package, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but is in reality the case. I would have liked a nice case. I think the Turris deserves a nice case, not only because of the performance that it offers, but ultimately because of the price that it does have. As I was saying earlier, and now moving along, larger diameter drivers, they've been a bit of a hit and miss. There are IEMs which have been, really well tuned with larger single DDs, but the majority of them, and I've just selected a few here just to give you an overall idea. The majority of them have been a little bit of a letdown. I also want to make perfectly clear that I haven't selected these IEMs in any way to kind of find the winner or the loser. What I am trying to basically do by bringing these IEMs is show that yes, there have been other attempts at larger diameter single DD drivers or single DD IEMs, let's put it that way, and that the majority of them have been, a bit of a letdown. Anyway, what am I talking about? I'm talking about, for example, models like the Kailin, the HE03D, which is a really beautiful IEM. I mean, physically, it's a very nicely built IEM, beautiful shell, beautiful faceplate, and some nice, interesting technological implementations being used as well in it. It's got a decent high quality driver as well in it, also 12 millimeters, but somewhat let down by the very unorthodox tuning, which I think was its biggest drawback. I attempted at retuning it. I actually was able to do so, and I, not to toot my horn, but I much more prefer my tuning or my revision of the tuning than the tuning that the 03D has in stock format. And I think that was the main problem ultimately for it not being as successful as it could have been. This was also an IEM that cost around $200. And talking about now the cases, this is the sort of case I was actually expecting for the Turris, and I think that the Turris deserved. Okay, that's one example there. The other example of a larger diameter single DD was something that the BGVP launched, which was called the Melody. Again, it had a really nice high quality single DD driver, a nice cable with exchangeable terminations. It had exchangeable nozzles as well. The driver in itself was really good, with very capable bass, but then the way that the mids and upper mids and treble had their tuning done was well, for lack of a better word, a bit of a disaster. And again, the only way I was able to salvage the tuning was by redoing it myself, and retuned. Yes, it became a much more capable IEM in its stock format. Again, the sound at low volumes was interesting, but the moment you kind of gave it a little bit more of gas, of volume, it just completely got out of control, and it didn't really scale in the best of manners, let's put it that way. The third one is an IEM that comes from BQEYZ. It's called the Autumn. It's an IEM that's been out now for a couple of years. I believe it was launched in 2021. It had an interesting implementation of these of that front ventral. Oops, my apologies. that front vent there, did you see, is exchangeable, offering 3 different levels of bass intensity. Beautifully built IEM, nice 13mm driver inside, phenomenal sound for an IEM that came out back, like I said, back in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, with a very unorthodox style of tuning, which completely departed from the likes of what Moondrop was offering at the time, and even Tanstrom with the Oxygen. It gave a very nice sound, and this was one of the few, let's say, larger diameter single DDs that for many years existed, or has existed for many years, that I thought was worthwhile considering. It really was well done, and that's something that BQ must be given its deserved merit. They're not a brand that launches a lot of IEMs. Their IEMs are always subjected to a very lengthy period of R&D, but the result is always very favorable, and they've used various implementations of single DDs, single DD, pure single DD like this one, or single DD with a bone conduction, single DD with a planar, single DD with the passive radiator, and every single one of them has been an interesting experience. Okay, so that was the BQ-EYZ's offering. Let's Show also had an interesting IEM a couple of years ago, which is called the D13. Again, a single DD of 13mm in size, with exchangeable nozzles, and its problem, honestly, was the fact that the way that the balance had been struck between the bass and then the mids, which were a little bit overly forward, made it for a listen that was a little bit on the fatiguing side. Again, it had to be subjected to a little bit of a retune. Probably the easiest one to retune when compared to the Kaylin and to the Melody, and retuned, yes, retuned, it's actually quite an impressive IEM. But in its stock format, like I said, although compared to, let's say, the Kaylin and the Melody, it is a better offering than those two. I think that it was not in stock format up to the performance level that the BQ-EYZ Autumn was capable of offering. Then sometime late last year, beginning of this year, FIO came out with this IEM here, which is the FD15, which uses a 13mm driver as well, actually 13.6 if I'm not mistaken, so that's a large single DD. And this was a very, very pleasant surprise, to say the least. Why? Because they, I think, maybe took cues from an IEM known as the MIM Dark Magician, and the tuning that IEM was subjected to, and I guess they maybe implemented or took ideas and tried to apply them here to the FD15, and the tuning and the sound performance that this IEM is capable of is really, really impressive. That's the reality. So it kind of became, let's say, the new king of the larger diameter single DD drivers, and one that definitely, if you are wanting a single DD which is of a large diameter and is properly tuned, without a question, this is one of the IEMs to consider. And I say one because I now consider the Turris as the other viable option. But you may ask, but Akros, and what about all the ear acoustic stuff? Fair enough, ear acoustic also uses a larger diameter driver than usual, 11.4mm. But I tried to, or rather, I consider larger diameter drivers 12mm and above. And if you notice, all of them here are either 12 or above, 12 and 13, or even slightly above that. So although you could argue that yes, the ear acoustic kind of almost fall into this ballpark, I wanted to keep things above the 12mm, let's say, point for the sake of this review. And as I was saying, the MK12 Turris is in my opinion now the other very solid and viable alternative to what the FD15 was offering us from FIO. Like I said, it's got the 3 nodules which offer 3 tuning, let's say, flavors. 2 of the nozzles, the gold and the silver, the difference is not much. The red nozzle does offer a more noticeable difference. Anyway, to better explain that and to continue with the review, I'm actually going to show you the graphs, and I think that will be way more self-explanatory. As I was saying, I think showing the graphs will better explain a lot of what I want to talk about in terms of the sound of the Turris. Anyway, this is the graph of the Turris using the gold stock or standard nozzle that it comes. And as you can see straight away by the graph, it has a slightly unusual tuning in the sense that, yes, we can notice that there's a a nice thickness here to the bass, which will then confer a sound which initial impressions might be, oh, it's overly thick, overly muddy, but that's not the case because the driver is a very high quality driver. And then it's got a, let's say a less than usual presentation in terms of the mids, upper mids and treble, when you consider the majority, the IEMs now all trying to follow kind of a Harman approach. That they try and follow that approach of the moon drop stuff, of the oxygen stuff, and other IEMs with that kind of vibe. Okay, jumping into the actual sound here. So, absolutely phenomenal bass. Really, really good bass. It's clean, it's detailed, it's got more than enough ability to resolve any complexities of the songs, at least with my selection of music that I listen to. It was able to handle anything from CHMCL souped to, let's say, cult to even DJ Tamer, to some Amapiano, which is some South African house music, to Nora Jones, to even rock. It handled all sorts of bass very, very well. I was truly impressed. So if this here is in any way something that might worry you, I would say don't, because the bass is clean, detailed, and it doesn't, in my opinion, bleed in a negative manner into the mids. Instead, in my opinion, it offers a nice lushness and a nice fullness to the mids, which makes them really rich. Okay, fair enough, and I will give you this much: if you are a freak for ultimate cleanliness in the mids, then maybe this might not be the ideal, only because that it gives that bass, or that mids rather, that that, I wouldn't say thickness, but that colored weight that might deter you from, let's say, the audiophile correct presentation of a certain song. But I didn't find that colored way of doing the bass, and then obviously how it affects the mids, was in any way taking anything from the music. Okay, so if you are a person like me that likes to listen to a wide genre of music, anything from EDM to jazz to funk, it's, trust me, the MK12 does the work. If anything, and if this serves as a somewhat of a basis of comparison, I would say that this kind of offers a sound similar to the ear acoustic high-end model, not the pro, sorry, not the max version, the normal high-end, or then the pro max version. Very similar to that. Another one that can kind of have some sort of vibe, which also the Turi emulates, is the NF-Acous NA20, the audiophile version of the 20 series. Although I would say that this one is a little bit darker in the higher end, in the higher frequencies, as compared to the NA20. But anyway, so I think by what I just said, you already are understanding the sort of sound. It's a organic, old school type of sound that is very, very detailed in the bass, because the driver definitely does help. And then the mids have got that quality which gives them richness and conveys a sense of musicality, which makes music be music. It makes it feel alive and not overly clinical and sterilized, as some IEMs sometimes are. In their attempt to be the ultimate in correctness, they lose that musicality, which ultimately I think is the most important. We are listening to music because we are listening to music and we enjoy it. If we are listening to our IEM just for the sake of its technicalities, then I don't know, I think to each its own, but for me it doesn't make any sense. Now, mids as well, really nicely done. when I take that 100 hertz point there that I like using, you might say to yourself, oh, but Tony, it's kind of a little bit below 2, won't it kind of make this area shout or be? No, because this is a 12 millimeter driver, and when you hear the IEM, this actually sounds a little bit more prominent than what it actually looks like in terms of the graph. Mids are, in my opinion, like I said, clean. Upper mids, the same thing. And then the treble is a little bit on the shy side. If you do use the wideboard, this dip here, this trough, is a little bit more plateaued, and it does somewhat help bring up maybe the treble a little bit, but the treble is not, in my opinion, where the strengths of the MK12 lie. The strengths of the MK12 is in the high quality bass and in the mid-range presentation. All right, the highs are there in sufficient quantity and in the sufficient energy to give the rest of the presentation, for the most part, a correctness. There was one or two occasions that I would have liked a little bit more of twinklies and sparklies, but I mean, honestly, that's just me now nitpicking. Although I don't usually recommend or like using any sort of EQing, if I actually had to, I would probably EQ just a little bit of extra energy up top just to give it a little bit more detail. On the other hand, there's also the fact that I don't have the hearing ability that perhaps many of you still have, which you can hear much more up top. And I think those of you that still have their full hearing capabilities will probably not find that the Turris is in any way lacking in the higher end of the spectrum. Now, in terms of left and right channel, as you can see, they're almost perfectly matched. There really is nothing there to talk about. With regards to the other nozzles, this one that I've now placed in blue, actually, you know what, let me just change it to red so that you guys can see a little bit better. Or actually, let's make it green. There we go, green. All right, green. That's the silver nozzle, and as I said, this here is negligible. The rest is the same. I mean, this was just me not being able to actually 100% match the 8K peak with the depth of the insertion. And then the other nozzle, the red nozzle, offers us this tuning, which ever so slightly boosts the bass and kind of gives this area there of the upper mids and treble a more kind of, let's say, almost harmonish type of feel. What did I think about this particular tuning? Personally, I liked it, okay? I think that the majority or a large number of people might think this tuning a little bit overly warm. And what I think maybe could have been an option for Hidizs was make a tuning which was somewhere in between these two. Also having this sort of, let's say, plateauing of that frequency, of the frequency spectrum here in the mids, upper mids and treble, but a little bit higher up, a little bit more energetic. Instead of offering that other tuning that they basically is the same, the gold and the silver, do away with the silver one and make a tuning which is a little bit more prominent here, and at the same time not boosting the bass. So a little bit more of boost there to kind of to plateau things slightly in a higher level, maybe a dB and a half, 2 above, and not boosting the bass. That would be my suggestion to Hidizs. If they are able to do this, I think then you will have 3 very distinctive tunings that will definitely make the MK12 way more competent. Anyway, this is the tunings that the MK12 offers. I listened to it in this tuning with the gold nozzle, which is the one that I said, which I like the best, or which I like the most. And then I, like I said, compared it with a number of IEMs. When I took things like, for example, you know, and as I mentioned earlier, when I took things like, for example, the HE03D, it wasn't, I mean, there was no contest possible, and I'll just place it so you guys can have an idea. Okay, this is the HE03D. I think it's very, very self-explanatory. If maybe they had been able to do something a little bit more well executed up top here, and maybe just ever so slightly drop here this energy level, I think then maybe the 03D would have been a very interesting sounding IEM. It's not this dip that it has there in the sub bass that's a problem, and it's not really the thickness that it offers there, because the driver, as I mentioned, is a high quality driver. It's more this area here. So I mean, it's just no contest as it is in stock format. It's just no contest for the Turris. The Turris just eats it alive. The other one, which again was no contest, and it was the BGVP, the melody. The bass kind of has the same sort of vibe. I'm not going to deny it, but this energy here in that 3 to 5, 6K is way too much, and it's the way that it scales. It just shouts. If the Turris has one thing, is that it actually maintains a very good scaling. So the more volume you give it, things carry on being more balanced. And if anything, I even found that at higher volumes, although I don't really recommend you listen to it at very high volumes for a long time, it actually started having that little extra amount of energy in the higher frequencies, which made cymbals sound just a little bit more there, which was one of the areas that sometimes here and there I found, it made trumpets sound just a little bit more energetic in the right manner. Just minor. So again, the melody was no possible contest whatsoever. The Let Sure, and what I'm going to show is the Let Sure in its retuned profile. In its retuned profile, as you can see, yes, it sounds quite nice. In its stock profile, this here is quite a bit more energized. And again, it suffers from that balance between this part of the spectrum and then the mid bass being just out of whack, and it makes it sound too intense for its good. At lower volumes, maybe fine, but the moment you just give it a little bit more energy, no, it's not necessarily a nice IEM to listen to. And then finally, because I don't want to run through all of them, but finally the other one, which I think, yes, is definitely another very solid large diameter driver, and I would say these two actually, in my opinion, complement themselves very nicely, is the FD15. The way that the FD15, and I've just placed the graph now here in green, has been tuned is, honestly, if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to it, I really recommend you listen to it. Now you ask me, and rightfully so, but so Tony, which one would you choose? Which one would you prefer? Would you prefer the FD15 or would you prefer the Turris? To be totally honest, I would have a really hard time choosing, and ultimately my decision would have to be based on the price that I would be able to get one and the other. And that's and that's not the let's say politically correct reply that I want to give, but that's me trying to be as honest as possible. I like both of the IEMs and how both of them sound. I would probably say that because the Turris does have those nozzles which do allow a little bit more, let's say, versatility in what the IEM can sound like, I would maybe say that the Turris probably might be the better option. I would say also that if the FD15 has maybe upper mids, upper mids and treble, which are slightly edging out the Turris, the bass of the Turris definitely edges out the bass of the FIO, and I think that comes down to the fact that the FIO's driver, although it is a good driver, it is not on the same league, in my opinion. It's not on the same overall league in terms of quality as the driver of the Turris. I think that if maybe FIO had used a higher quality driver, things could have been slightly different. But I think the reason why they actually tuned it in this manner with a very relaxed type of bass presentation not only has to do with the fact that you're obviously talking about a large diameter driver, 13.4, 13.6 millimeters, so that's a big driver there, but the fact that they knew that if they weren't able to have the magnetic flux needed to control that diaphragm properly, because of obviously cost constraints and so on and so forth, to avoid the driver distorting, they they decided to let's tune it with a lower bass level, and not overemphasize, not put the driver working in an area where mechanical stress can become a problem and introduce unnecessary distortion. And that's something that the Turris does not suffer of. I mean, when I honestly, and I say this very confidently, I've made my fair share of single DD drivers. I've retuned my fair share of drivers as well, of IEMs. I've had drivers of all sorts of, cross my hands, and I've played around extensively. And I can definitely say this, I would love to get my hands on these drivers from Hidizs. I really would, because you are listening to the IEM, and it's something that, I don't know, it's difficult to actually put in words, but you can feel that the driver there is of a high quality caliber. It's just as simple as that. The way that it's able to start, stop, the bass impacts on songs, how it's clean and precise, definitely is an indicator that the driver there was not something that was a fluke. It wasn't just okay, whatever. I know that many people, for example, praise the driver from the MIM Dark Magician, and I'm not saying that it's not a good driver, but I think in the case of the MIM Dark Magician driver, however good it is a driver that it doesn't compete. It's not on the same league as this driver from Hidizs. Anyway, that's just me now, just blabbing away and drifting. To summarize, what do I think of the MK12 Turris? Phenomenal IEM. I'm not saying this because I just feel like saying it, or I'm trying to shield Hidizs. No, I truly think that if what you are looking for, what you are wanting is a type of sound which moves away from that more traditional Harman approach, if you are wanting a sound which is not what, for example, the Moondrop Cadence or Moondrop Kato, or then the 10th Gem Oxygen, or the 10th Gem HANA 2, or any of the drivers or the IEMs that have that sort of Harman style tuning. If you want a sound which is more old school, more musical, more organic in its presentation, ultimately you could say even slightly more colored and not as audiophile correct, the MK12 is definitely one of those IEMs, definitely. And with the ability that you can now pick it up during Kickstarter, before the Kickstarter project starts, program starts, and secure its price for $109, I think it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. It's something which should seriously be considered. Anyway, guys, don't want to carry on rambling here. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask me, and I'll do my best to reply to them as quickly as possible. All right, you take care now. Bye bye.